The housing market you once knew is dead. We are no longer discussing simple buyer mistakes. We are witnessing the structural weaponization of real estate. In 2025, the convergence of FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0 and a brutal insurance hard market has rendered millions of properties financially radioactive. With interest rates cemented near 6% and the NAR Settlement dismantling agent protections, you are walking into a minefield blindfolded. This is not a guide to saving money. It is a forensic analysis of 12 systemic traps designed to liquidate your future. If you do not understand the new mechanics of this collapse, you have already lost. The American home is no longer a sanctuary. It is a depreciating asset wrapped in layers of legal obfuscation and physical decay, sold to you by entities desperate to offload their liabilities before the system corrects itself. The first and most fatal error in this environment is the naive belief that what you see is what you get. The reality of 2026 is that the physical structure of the home is often a lie, maintained only by the seller's silence and the buyer's ignorance. We begin with the most prevalent trap in the current market, the as-is sale. For decades, as-is was a simple warning label, a signal that the seller would not perform repairs. In the frenzied markets of 2020 through 2022, buyers were coerced into waiving inspections entirely just to secure a bid, essentially gambling their financial future on a structure they had never properly examined. But the market of 2025 has shifted. The desperate days of waiving inspections are over, with the rate of pre-inspections dropping below 4%, not because buyers are careless, but because the power dynamic has normalized. You now have the leverage to inspect, yet most buyers are still using obsolete methodology. They walk through the property, they look at the walls, they trust their eyes. This is a fatal mistake. The seller may refuse to repair the roof, citing the as-is clause, but they cannot hide from the new standard of forensic verification. The era of the flashlight-wielding inspector is dead. In its place, we see the weaponization of technology against the seller's reluctance. We are seeing the normalization of drone technology to inspect what was previously inaccessible. A seller can paint over a water stain, but they cannot hide a compromised chimney or a failing roof structure from a high-resolution drone survey. Furthermore, the visual spectrum is no longer enough. The integration of thermal imaging into standard inspections has fundamentally altered the negotiation landscape. These cameras detect the invisible, the thermal signature of moisture behind a freshly painted wall, the heat loss from non-existent insulation, the electrical hotspots that signal a looming fire hazard. This is non-destructive testing, and it strips away the as-is defense. You do not ask the seller to fix it. You present the thermal data, you quantify the rot, and you demand a closing credit. The as-is label does not absolve the seller of fraud, nor does it protect them from the new disclosure laws spreading from states like Florida, which now mandate the revelation of flood history and lead dust hazards regardless of the transaction type. However, the deception extends beyond the structure itself to the very ground it sits on. The second systemic failure lies in the survey. In a bid to save a few $100s, buyers and cash-strapped sellers are colluding to reuse old surveys, relying on a document known as the Affidavit of No Change. This is a legal fiction. It is a lie agreed upon by both parties to facilitate a transaction, but the risk falls entirely on you. When you accept an old survey, you sever the chain of liability, a concept known as privity of contract. And the surveyor who drew those lines 10 years ago has no obligation to you. If a neighbor's fence has encroached by 3 feet, or if a new easement was recorded after that survey was printed, you have no recourse. You are buying a lawsuit. The physical reality of the land has likely changed in ways a decade-old piece of paper cannot reflect. Modern standards have evolved. A survey from the past may not even meet the digital precision required by today's title insurers. While the cost of a new residential boundary survey has risen to between $500 and $200 in 2025, the alternative is trusting a seller who claims they don't have a survey, or that nothing has changed. This is rarely true. The pins in the ground buried under years of landscaping tell a different story. one that you must verify with a metal detector and a fresh professional assessment. The survey reveals the flood zone, the encroachments, and the metes and bounds that define your actual ownership. Without it, you are purchasing a theoretical asset, not a defined piece of property. The final component of this physical deception is the infrastructure hidden beneath the soil, the well and septic systems. This is where the negligence of the past meets the regulatory iron fist of 2025. For years, a septic inspection was often a cursory glance, a walkover, where an inspector simply poked the ground with a rod to check for sogginess. That era is over. States like Virginia have enacted legislation such as HB 2671, effective July 2025, which criminalizes this kind of superficial verification. The law now demands that inspections be performed by licensed professionals who must open every accessible component of the system, from the distribution box to the dispersal fields. This shift is catastrophic for sellers of older homes who have deferred maintenance. A system that works fine when only 2 people live in the house may fail immediately under the scrutiny of a regulatory stress test. The days of a simple pass-fail grade are gone. You are now looking at a mandatory, detailed written report that exposes the biological and mechanical reality of the waste system. If the seller has not pumped the tank, the inspection cannot be completed. If the system does not meet the new environmental standards, the property is effectively uninhabitable until tens of thousands of dollars are spent on replacement. You cannot rely on the homeowner's word that it flows fine. You need the certificate, the county approval, and the cold, hard data from a licensed engineer. The infrastructure of the American suburb is aging, and without these new rigorous inspections, you are volunteering to pay for its collapse. If the physical decay of the American housing stock is the visible threat, the regulatory and financial framework surrounding it is the invisible noose. We have moved beyond the simple era of checking a box on a disclosure form. In 2026, we are operating within a hostile legal environment where the government, insurance cartels, and environmental agencies have rewritten the rules of liability. The fourth and perhaps most insidious mistake in this new regime involves the protection of ownership itself, the title policy. For generations, title insurance was the bedrock of a secure transaction, a non-negotiable shield against the ghosts of a property's past, liens, forgeries, and missing heirs. But in 2025, under the guise of affordability, the financial system introduced a Trojan Horse, the Attorney Opinion Letter, or AOL. Promoted by government-sponsored enterprises like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to lower closing costs, these letters are being sold to unsuspecting buyers as a modern equivalent to title insurance. This is a dangerous falsehood. The data is clear. While an AOL might save you a nominal fee up front, it eviscerates your long-term protection. Unlike title insurance, which covers the unknowns, fraud, impersonation, and clerical errors hidden deep in the county archives, an AOL only creates liability if the attorney was negligent in reviewing the known public records. It is a product designed to protect the lender's interest, not your equity. In a market riddled with distressed sales and rapid flips, the risk of a clouded title is higher than ever. Yet buyers are being steered toward a legal product that leaves them naked against the most devastating claims. This erosion of protection is occurring simultaneously with a radical expansion of liability regarding the property's history. The fifth systemic trap lies in the disclosure statements, specifically concerning environmental toxicity. The old philosophy of caveat emptor, buyer beware, is being dismantled by aggressive legislation that turns the seller's silence into a legal weapon. The most critical shift in 2025 comes from the Environmental Protection Agency regarding lead-based paint. For decades, the standard was loose, a numerical threshold that allowed acceptable levels of poison. That standard has been obliterated. As of January 2025, the EPA has lowered the dust lead hazard standards to any reportable level detected by an accredited laboratory. This is not a minor bureaucratic tweak. It is a retroactive condemnation of millions of homes built before 1978. A seller can no longer hide behind a "don't ask, don't tell" policy. If lead dust is present at any level, it is now a reportable hazard, triggering mandatory and exorbitantly expensive abatement procedures before a home can be safely inhabited or renovated. The casual fixer-upper has become a biohazard containment site, and if you sign that disclosure without understanding the new federal zero-tolerance policy, you are not buying a house. You are acquiring a toxic waste liability. The deception deepens when we turn our eyes to the water. The sixth and seventh traps, flood zones, and insurance history have converged into a singular crisis of affordability. The days of relying on a seller's word that a property never floods are over, ended by the sheer force of legislative mandates like Florida's HB 1049 and SB 948. These laws, which are becoming the template for national policy, strip away the seller's right to remain silent. They must now explicitly disclose whether they have ever filed a flood insurance claim or received federal disaster assistance, but the real danger is not what the seller tells you. It is what the federal algorithms have decided. The implementation of FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0 has rendered the old flood maps obsolete. You can no longer look at a map, see that a house is in Zone X, and assume you are safe. The new system does not price risk by zone. It prices risk by the individual asset. The elevation of the first floor, the distance to water, the cost to rebuild. A house can sit outside the traditional floodplain and still face a 300% increase in premiums because the algorithm deems it vulnerable. This leads directly to the insurance hard market of 2025-2026. Insurance premiums in volatile states have surged by over 20% in a single year. But price is not the only issue. Availability is. Major carriers are retreating from entire regions, leaving buyers dependent on state-run insurers of last resort. This makes the CLUE report, Comprehensive Loss Underwriting Exchange, the most critical document in the transaction. A property with a heavy claims history, a roof claim here, a water damage claim there, is not just expensive to insure, it may be fundamentally uninsurable. If a property cannot be insured, it cannot be mortgaged. We are seeing transactions collapse at the 11th hour because the buyer failed to audit the insurance history early in the process. The seller may have patched the drywall, but they cannot patch the permanent record of claims that brands the property as a financial pariah. In this new ecosystem, a home without an insurable future is worthless, regardless of how pristine it looks on the surface. The trap is set not by the water rising outside, but by the underwriting algorithms locking the doors from the inside. We arrive now at the final mechanism of the trap, the financialization of the home itself. In 2026, a house is no longer merely a place of shelter. It is a complex financial derivative tethered to global capital markets, energy speculation, and the surveillance economy. The remaining errors in the buyer's playbook are not just oversights, they are failures to understand that the rules of engagement have been rewritten by court settlements and corporate strategy. The eighth systemic failure occurs at the closing table, centered on the volatility of closing costs. This landscape was detonated by the National Association of Realtors NAR Settlement, which took full effect in late 2024. For a century, the flow of money was opaque but predictable. Today, that predictability is gone. The new reality mandates that buyers must sign written representation agreements before they even step foot in a property, legally binding them to commission fees that were once invisible. This structural change was intended to create transparency, but in a high-interest rate environment, it has created a liquidity crisis for the average buyer. However, the data from 2025 reveals a counter-narrative that only the sophisticated understand. While the legal burden has shifted to the buyer, the market leverage has not. In cities like Seattle and Portland, where inventory lingers, we are witnessing a surge in seller concessions. This is the hidden currency of the 2026 market. Desperate to offload properties without lowering the headline price, which would crash comparable values for the entire neighborhood, sellers are now effectively subsidizing the buyer's entry. In the first quarter of 2025, over 71% of sales in cooling markets included these concessions. The mistake buyers make is using this money for superficial costs. The strategic move, the one institutional investors employ, is to weaponize these concessions to buy down the mortgage rate. In a world where rates hover near 6%, a temporary buy-down funded by the seller is the only mathematical path to solvency. If you are paying your own closing costs in this market, you are essentially donating equity to a seller who has already calculated your desperation into their asking price. This financial precarity leads directly to the ninth trap, the home warranty. In the past, this was viewed as a junk fee, a low-value add-on. That perspective is dangerously outdated. We are living through an era of hyperinflation in skilled labor and materials. The cost to replace a central HVAC unit has skyrocketed, turning a mechanical failure into a bankruptcy-level event for a leveraged household. The data shows that 94% of homeowners have faced major repair costs averaging $2,200 in the last 5 years. In 2026, a warranty costing $600 to $1,050 is not an optional accessory. It is a mandatory hedge against the inevitable disintegration of the asset's mechanical systems. With service fees stabilizing around $75 to $150, the warranty acts as a stop-loss order on your maintenance budget. To ignore it is to expose your cash reserves to the unmerciful volatility of the supply chain. But the extraction of value goes deeper than the pipes and wires. It goes to the geology itself. The 10th mistake is the forfeiture of mineral rights. As the global energy transition accelerates, the land beneath American homes has become a battleground. In energy-rich states like Texas, Oklahoma, and Alaska, we are seeing a consolidation of subterranean assets by large energy conglomerates. Developers and large landholders are systematically stripping mineral rights from surface deeds before selling the home to you. They sell you the grass and the drywall, but they keep the oil and gas. The risk is not theoretical. Without these rights, you have no standing to stop a drilling operation that could horizontally fragment the rock beneath your foundation. You must audit the title commitment. If the mineral rights do not convey, you are not a landowner. You are a tenant on top of an industrial extraction site. The gatekeepers of this system, the lenders, have also adjusted their protocols. The 11th trap involves the misunderstanding of mortgage nuances in 2026. The Federal Housing Finance Agency has raised conforming loan limits to over $832,000 to keep pace with inflation, acknowledging that the starter home is now a luxury good. But the real shift is cultural. The stigma against FHA and VA loans, once dismissed by sellers as too bureaucratic, is dying. It is dying because the market is starving for qualified buyers. The appraisal rules for these government-backed loans have been modernized, stripping away the archaic economic life requirements that used to kill deals. VA appraisals now allow for desktop valuations, speeding up the capital flow. Sellers no longer have the luxury of rejecting these loans. If you allow a seller or an ill-informed agent to steer you away from these protected financing vehicles, you are walking away from the most favorable terms the government offers. Finally, we confront the 12th and most modern deception, the smart home Trojan Horse. The definition of a fixture, what stays with the house, has been blurred by the Internet of Things. We are no longer arguing over curtains and chandeliers. We are arguing over the nervous system of the home. Smart thermostats, video doorbells, and integrated security locks are legally considered fixtures if they are hardwired. Yet sellers frequently strip these devices upon departure, leaving holes in the wall and a paralyzed infrastructure. But the physical removal is less dangerous than the digital residue. Buying a smart home without a digital handover is a profound security risk. If the seller does not perform a factory reset, they retain administrative access to your cameras, your locks, and your thermostat. You are moving into a house where the previous owner can still watch you, unlock your doors, or freeze your pipes from their phone. The contract of 2026 must include specific checkboxes for these devices, as seen in the new forms from the California and Chicago associations. You must demand a digital cleansing of the property. Without it, you do not own the home. You are merely a guest in a surveillance node controlled by a stranger. The system is designed to strip mine value from the unwary. From the soil rights deep underground to the digital permissions in the cloud, every aspect of the transaction has been monetized and weaponized. The housing market of 2026 is not a ladder to wealth. It is a high-stakes arena where only the informed survive. The dream is gone. All that remains is the deal. We are standing at the precipice of what analysts are calling the Great Housing Reset. Do not mistake stabilization for safety. The forecast for 2026 offers no return to the easy money of the past decade. The experts from NAR and Redfin agree this is the new baseline, and it is unforgiving. The fantasy of 3% interest rates is dead. We are entering a period of enforced discipline where mortgage rates will cement themselves around 6%. This is not a temporary spike. It is the cost of entry for the foreseeable future. While inventory is expected to tick upward, it remains artificially suppressed below pre-pandemic levels, keeping a floor under prices. You will not see a crash. You will see a slow, grinding ascent of 1% to 4%, a market that bleeds the unprepared through attrition rather than sudden collapse. In this environment, hope is not a strategy. The only leverage you have is information. The buyer-friendly pockets emerging in 2026 are not gifts. They are battlegrounds where only the data-literate will survive. Your protection is no longer the handshake of a friendly agent. It is the thermal camera scanning for moisture behind the walls. It is the clue report exposing the uninsurable history of a property. It is the aggressive negotiation of seller concessions to buy down your rate, using their desperation to fund your solvency. You must choose your shields carefully, rejecting the cheap allure of attorney opinion letters for the ironclad security of title insurance. You must demand the digital keys to the smart home, ensuring you are the master of your environment, not a tenant in a surveillance state. The system has been re-engineered to transfer risk from the institution to the individual. The banks, the insurers, and the energy conglomerates have insulated themselves. You are the variable. In the housing market of 2026, there are no victims, only volunteers. Do not volunteer to be the liquidity for someone else's exit strategy. Do your due diligence, verify everything, trust nothing. Trust.